In Peru, social movements continue to arrive in Lima to participate in the March of Los Cuatro Suyos. The National Police announced the increase by 9,600 officers in the capital. Gaston Browne was sworn in for a third term as the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, leaving his Labour Party after legislative elections of the Caribbean country. Italian foreign minister said his country is ready to increase the flow of legal migrants to Tunisia, but called for more efforts against illegal immigration. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. In Peru, the National Police announced that as of Wednesday, it will increase to 9,600 the number of agents assigned to the capital Lima. The decision was allegedly made to maintain the public order during the protests. The head of the Lima district, the National Police General Victor Sanabria, said that since the beginning of the mobilizations, 5,000 agents were deployed, but they have now decided to increase that number to guarantee order during the demonstrations in the capital. Currently, hundreds of Peruvians from different parts of the country, including students, farmers, and community leaders, are arriving in Lima to take part in the demonstrations against the government of Dina Boluarte. On Wednesday in Peru, the Carabaya Health Network confirmed that snipers shot and killed a 35-year-old woman in the town of Macusani with a gunshot to the head. The crime occurred during the protests against President Dina Boluarte in the town of Macusani in the Puno region, where police snipers filmed themselves shooting at the citizens. The last victim of the state terrorism was Sonia Aguilar Quispe, who was taken to the San Martin de Porres hospital. Another citizen identified as Salomon Valenzuela was taken to the hospital, where he remains with a reserved prognosis due to open thoracic trauma. The military and police have caused the death of 52 people since December 7, 2022, when the Congress dismissed Pedro Castillo and appointed his vice president as President of the Republic. In Peru, social sectors started a national civic strike on Thursday to demand the resignation of Dina Boluarte amid the constant protests that began with the ousting of the former president Pedro Castillo. The national strike is replicated in different parts of the country. In Arequipa, demonstrators hold protests and have blocked several roads to show their rejection of the government of Dina Boluarte and the Congress. Since the beginning of the protests earlier December, the current government has disregarded the claims and increased the violent repression, which has killed close to 50 civilians. In this context, thousands have arrived in the capital city to make their demands heard. Local media indicates that the outlook for this day is of constant mobilizations by different workers' unions and organizations in demand of new elections and the closing of the Congress. On Thursday, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Browne was sworn in for a third term after the ruling Labour Party secured the victory in the legislative elections of the Caribbean country. The ruling party obtained 1,295 votes against 621 for Alistair Thomas, the opposition United Progressive Party, and Jamel Knight, the National Democratic Alliance. In a first for Antigua and Barbuda's history, Browne, 55, is the first executive leader to win 3 consecutive general elections and consolidate his position in the next 5 years. General Attorney Sidroy O. Benjamin was also sworn in. The Labour Party won 2 of the 3 seats in the constituency, according to preliminary figures revealed by the Electoral Commission of Antigua and Barbuda. More than 60,000 citizens were called to vote for the renewal of the Senate and the House of Representatives. After the legislative elections held in Antigua and Barbuda to renew the Senate and the House of Representatives, several heads of state and government in the region congratulated Prime Minister Gaston Browne. One of them was Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez, who sent warm congratulations to Antigua and Barbuda's premier for his electoral victory and the re-election as the head of the government. The Cuban diplomat reaffirmed the nation's willingness to continue strengthening the historical bonds of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation that unite both nations. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva denounced the coup and violent actions against his government by the former President Jair Bolsonaro and his supporters after they attacked several seats of power in the country. In an interview with a local media, Lula da Silva said that former President Bolsonaro, together with his ultra-right followers, are participants of the coup attempt of January the 8th. He emphasized that if evidence is found about their involvement, they should be punished by the law. The Brazilian prosecutor's office has formally accused 39 suspects linked to the riots against government headquarters. In Brazil on Thursday, President Lula da Silva will hold a meeting today with all the rectors of universities and federal institutes at the Planalto Palace, the seat of the executive power in the capital. According to media reports, the Minister of Education, Camilo Santana, will attend the meeting where the 70 rectors of higher education and 2 directors of the Federal Center of Technological Education will be present. In this sense, the meeting aims at resuming the regular meetings of the President with rectors, which was common in the previous terms of office of Lula and the former President Dilma Rousseff. On the other hand, the group of rectors described the current educational situation as a step backwards during the 4 years of the government of former President Bolsonaro. In El Salvador, activists are denouncing the arbitrary detention of union leaders. Groups of solidarity with the people of El Salvador, mostly from Germany and Switzerland, human rights groups, and other organizations like the Santa Marta Development Association and land conservation and anti-mineral mining groups are pushing for the release of the imprisoned union leaders. Also, they are striving to prevent the administration of Nayib Bukele from reintroducing mineral mining in the country. The activists' defense lawyers said that the case against them is weak and contradictory, that there is no real evidence to back the accusations, and that many of the charges were filed past due date. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. French President Emmanuel Macron met with Spanish President Pedro Sánchez in Barcelona on Thursday for a joint summit as Paris seeks to strengthen relations with Spain. At the meeting, they signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation to reinforce bilateral ties in matters such as migration, defense, and energy. With this treaty, Paris aims to strengthen ties with its non-German neighbors, especially those in Southern Europe. Also in the meeting, of great media impact, took place at the same time as a national strike began in France over the controversial pension reform, which experienced a day of protests over plans to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. And Germany's new defense minister, Boris Pistorius, met with the United States Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, in Berlin and announced that the two nations stand side by side on their approach to Ukraine. The U.S. Secretary of Defense stated that they will convene a meeting of around 50 countries on Friday at the Ramstein military base in Germany, including all 30 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization alliance, where the focus will be on more advanced support and heavier, more modern weapons for Ukraine. Many of its allies have announced plans to step up their military support to Kiev. This month, on one side, the U.S. promised to send its Bradley armored fighting vehicles, while France offered its mobile armored fighting vehicle for reconnaissance purposes.
As so often in history, the Federal Republic of Germany and the United States of America stand side by side in their approach, but also on the concrete issues, be it the infantry fighting vehicles, the Patriot air defense system, or the multiple rocket launchers.
Also in Marseille, France, several demonstrators marched. Thousands of demonstrators against Emmanuel Macron's pension reform marched to oppose the extension of the legal retirement age from 62 to 64 years. A day of strikes and the protests kicked off on Thursday, set to disrupt transport and schooling across the country in a trial for the government as workers oppose a deeply unpopular pensions overhaul. France's trade unions immediately called for a mass mobilization, which is to be the first time they have united since 12 years ago when the retirement age was hiked from 62 from 60. The unions are hoping for over 1 million demonstrators in more than 200 cities across France. Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said that 10,000 police will be on alert, more than a third of them in the capital, including to look out for some 1,000 demonstrators who could be violent. On Wednesday, hundreds of nurses marched through the streets of central London to demand better conditions and a pay rise, coinciding with the start of 2 days of strike action, called by the Royal College of Nursing Union, while the government passes a bill to restrict the protests. The march started at 3 p.m. in front of the University College Hospital in North London and concluded at the gates of Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office and official residence. Made up of almost 90% women, the nurses of the National Health System, the NHS, have rejected an offer of a pay rise of between 4% and 5% for next year, far below the sector's demands, which initially called for a 19% increase and later lowered it to 10%. In 2021, the British government granted a 3% rise for most NHS workers, a rise that the union called as an insufficient measure. And in the framework of the World Economic Forum, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned of the gravest geopolitical division and mistrust tearing the world apart, calling for actions to reform the international financial system and reduce the impacts of climate change.
We risk what I've called the great fracture, the decoupling of the world's two largest economies. A tectonic drift that would create two different sets of trade rules, two dominant currencies, two internets, and two conflicting strategies on artificial intelligence. This is the last thing we need. The IMF reported that dividing the global economy into two blocks could cut global GDP by a whopping $1.4 trillion.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. During the visit of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to Belarus, President Alexander Lukashenko said his government has honored his commitment to support Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. The Russian foreign minister stressed that his main concern is the security of Belarus and Russia because they know the West's intentions. Meanwhile, Kiev authorities accuse Belarus of being an accomplice of the Russian military operation. However, the Ukrainian military ruled out a new Moscow offensive from Belarusian territory, despite the fact that Russia has a military presence there of about 10,000 men with heavy artillery. On Thursday, ambulances and first aid crews rushed to Basra International Stadium in Iraq after a stampede of fans that left people injured and one dead. During the deadly stampede that broke outside Basra International Stadium in southern Iraq, at least one person was killed and dozens were injured. The army appealed to fans to follow the instructions of security forces personnel on access to the stadium to allow the championship to conclude in a civilized manner. Nevertheless, Iraqis had to climb into the ambulances and gather outside the stadium before the Gulf Cup final between Iraq and Oman. According to officials, the gates were still closed at the time of the stampede broke out. Sirens blared as ambulances arrived to ferry the injured to hospital. And the South African government announced on Thursday it will next month stage a 10-day joint military drills with Russia and China off its coast. The country's military confirmed in a statement that the multilateral maritime exercises named Operation Masi, which means smoke, will take place between February 17th to 27th. The drills aim at strengthening the already flourishing relations between South Africa, Russia and China, will be held at the largest port in the African nation and at the Richards Bay. In its statement, the Army also recalled this will be the second time that such a drill is held in the presence of the three naval forces, the first having taken place in November 2019 in Cape Town. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.